that's just what people do. The theory is you always find somebody new. I guess there was a time I believe that was true, but now...
Y'all ready for the Boogaloo? Are ya? You ready for the Civil War, the next revolution, the freedom of America, patriotism, and all that? You ready for that? You ready for that? Yeah. So, welcome to my channel, guys. I'm so glad you're here. I'm going to do today's segment about the coming war, whatever you want to call it. You know, you could call it a revolution, you could call it a civil war. I'll call it a Boogaloo because the difference between a revolution and a civil war would probably be who wins, right? That is, if the standing government wins, then you have a civil war. If the opposing force, the rebels, the rebellion actually wins, and that's a revolution, right? But what complicates it in this situation is that the rebellion seems to be coming from people who at least believe that they want to return to the government that has already been revolted against. So I don't know if it's a revolution or a civil war. So we're going to go with Boogaloo, right? So yeah, as I said, welcome to the channel. Today, in this episode, we're going to discuss how to start the Boogaloo, okay? In my last episode, I talked about, you know, some of the things that nobody wanted to hear about, right? The fact that we are not going to have, you know, a North versus South, you know, internal conflict. That the U.S. is so important to so many people that it's not going to be you and me against the evil government. It's going to be you and me and whoever we can get on our side against the evil government and whoever takes their side. And that's where it matters, right? You know, you look at Vietnam. It would have been easy to win Vietnam if China and Russia weren't involved, but they were. So that changed everything. And that's what's going to happen here. Don't make any mistakes about it. It's what's going to happen here. Everybody else is going to want to get involved because everybody has something to lose. So, how do we start a revolution? What do we need? What is the recipe for a revolution? Well, the first thing that is pretty much universally necessary is, you know, major suffering. Everybody has to already be hurting. If society is comfortable, and I mean not even totally comfortable, if they're not incredibly uncomfortable, they're afraid to fight against a powerful government. You know, the win-lose ratio isn't worth the losses. You look at all the welfare out there and all of, you know, the supplies, all the power. You know, people aren't going to want to be without AC. People in Florida are not going to go a month without AC. Whatever the government asks them to do, they'll do once they've lost their AC. That is torture. It is true torture. And most people, now I'm not talking about, you know, you guys that are all geared up and ready for the Boogaloo. I'm talking about society. Because for a real revolution to happen, we're going to have to get a good part of society on our side. We're not going to just go in as a group of, you know, gun-carrying rednecks and take over the government. That's not how that's going to come down. We're going to need support. We're going to need a lot of support, and the government's going to want support, so they're going to do what they can to get support, which means the government's going to supply the people that it wants on its side. So your neighbor who doesn't like guns is going to have to make that choice. And if they are comfortable, if the government is handing them electricity, if the government is handing them food, if the government is making sure that traffic is moving and that, you know, their bank accounts are still open and all that, what is your argument? Hey man, things are pretty bad. Well, I have a house, I have food, I have air conditioning, and I have a job. Things aren't that bad. Yeah, but they're taking our rights away. Well, they may be, but I'm still alive and I'm comfortable and my kids are in school and they have soccer practice this week. So I can't start a revolution when my kids have soccer practice next week. So all of that infrastructure has to have collapsed before the revolution can begin. Or at least enough of it that people start really feeling it. You have to make everyone uncomfortable. It's how it has always worked out, folks. I hate to say it, but that's how it worked out. Now, don't misinterpret this as a guide to what you should be doing. This is a guide to how it works, what causes revolutions. So I'm not telling you to get out there and disrupt our infrastructure. I'm not. I'm saying that until the government starts disrupting our infrastructure, until we can blame it on them, until it's all their fault, your neighbors are going to turn you in. Your neighbors are going to be like, hey, over here, my neighbor, he's got all the guns. He's preparing for the Boogaloo. He wants to take over the country. That's what's going to happen, buddy. It's all right. That's how it's going to work. And while you may put up a good fight and you might take down some of them awful government people, you're not going to win. You by yourself and you with your neighbors, the best you could hope for is something like that dude, I don't know, in Texas or whatever, that has been, on his own property for 30 years because they wanted to put him in jail and he wouldn't go, and it's a standoff. It's the world's longest standoff. John Brown, I don't remember, something like that. John Gray, something like that. I can't say his name right now for my life, but look him up, you'll find him. So the point is, that's the best you could hope for. That's not a Boogaloo, buddy. That is not a revolution. You are not returning us to our former glory. All you're doing is living in house arrest for the rest of your life, if you're lucky. So before anything kicks off, it doesn't matter how many times they come get your guns. If the government's coming to get your guns, and your neighbors are comfortable and they're sitting in their air conditioning because the government's making sure they have air conditioning, they're going to turn you in, man. You're not going to get any sympathy. None. So that's the first part. That is the most important part of revolution. Everybody has to be uncomfortable, or at least half the people have to be uncomfortable enough that if they're not willing to join on your side, they're not willing to join on the other side either. They're kind of impartial. They stand back and be like, I don't think this is a good idea, but you guys might win, so I don't want to piss you off either. That's the best you could hope for. But even then, what you have to hope for, once that fuel has been spread out, once everybody is all hot and bothered and uncomfortable, and it's the government's fault and something needs to be done, then someone needs to light that spark. Something bad has to happen. And when you look at the Boston Massacre, that was staged. It was staged. Be honest with yourself. I don't care what you've read. It was staged. It was an event that was specifically designed. It was specifically set up to ignite that passion in people. And they glorified it. They spread that all over the news and all over, all these pamphlets they spread out everywhere. They're like, look what happened. Of course, at that time, they had pretty much total control over most of the media, believe it or not. The king wasn't that interested. They didn't understand how vital, multiple points of disinformation were. The founders, the framers, the guys who started our American Revolution, they understood. They knew what it would take, and they jumped in on that. So, excuse me, still fighting this cold. It's been 3 months. I'm worried. But anyway, so the second thing that you have to happen is something to ignite that fire. And part of that, which is kind of the third, is that you have to have undeniable proof of that. It cannot be turned into a conspiracy or a theory or some kind of skeptical. It can't. It has to be so empirical, so provable, so unimpeachable that there is no doubt. Now, in this society, I have seen, especially on Facebook, things that are so incredibly cut and dry and unquestionably true being questioned by scientists, by important people who have chosen not to believe it and have forwarded opposing arguments that sound sensible. I mean, there are people out there that believe the earth is flat, and you cannot tell them otherwise. There's no way around it. And there's nothing you can do about those people, but don't give them any ammunition. Whatever it is that triggers this, whatever that ignition is, there has to be so much proof of it that most people can't deny it. And the only way that's going to happen is if it does truly affect everybody. So, when it's affecting you, it's harder for you to deny the truth, right? Hey, man, it's raining outside. I don't believe you. We'll walk outside. Well, crap, it is. Huh. Can't argue with that. Yeah, it's got to be that true. It's got to be that provable. It's got to be something where people can actually touch it and go, ow, man, that's hot. Yeah, you're right. It is hot. That's got to be it. So those are the three things it has to be. It has to be, number one, bad enough that everybody's willing to revolt. Number two, it's got to be, a dramatic event that was big enough that everybody was like, oh. And it has to be provable. It's got to be something that most people can't question. So that's the recipe for revolution. Now, do you want to start a revolution? No, you think you do. And I understand why you think you do. I'm so sick of watching the government just grow and grow and grow, and people who used to, appreciate small government are now beginning to, embrace big government and big spending and the huge deficit and all this. But that doesn't mean it's time for revolution. What it's time for right now is conversation. It's time to get people to understand that we are going down the wrong road. Now, there's a hard separation between me telling a leftist, look, man, government's getting too powerful. It's getting dangerous. We need to be careful because we're about to lose it all, because they look around the world and from here they see people who don't seem to be having a bad life and their government's in a lot more control. It's hard for them to understand that. At the same time, they're looking at, what they believe to be climate change, and they're saying, yeah, well, evidently the government's not strong enough because it can't fix this. So what we need is a stronger government. So you've got two different kinds of people here. Those who recognize that the government has gotten too powerful and is continuing, both parties, to get more and more powerful. And you have those who don't believe the government is doing enough to make life fair and make the world safe for everybody. I realize that that's the war that you think is going to happen, but how do you divide those sides? How do you determine who the belligerents are in your Boogaloo? It's ideals against each other that are not geographical. I mean, you've got neighbors against each other. You've got, so many things that could happen. So the only way that's ever going to divide out is, in the case of that, in case of where it's ideals against ideals, it's leftists versus modern rightists, which is not to the right, but it's to the right of the new left. If you have, a neighborhood and you've got 5 of each in the neighborhood, it's going to be an ugly war, isn't it? It's going to be really hard to tell who's who. So really, before this can kick off, we're also going to have some division in a geographical sense. People are going to have to start actually moving to places. The people who love the government, love more government, are going to need to move to places where the government is bigger. And the people who do not are going to need to move to the places where it's smaller, so that there's some sort of geographical line to this war that we're going to have. Now, that's not to say that can't happen during the war. Chances are, if this does break down, people, who are in my area, very rural, very conservative, relatively speaking, area, they're going to, they're going to feel the pressure. They're going to feel like they're, refugees. They're going to need to run north and try and get out of here, because they know that most of us aren't going to put up with it. The same thing for the conservatives in places like New York and LA. They're going to want to skedoodle, That's where their bug out bags matter. I've said in my other channel that, it's never good to bug out. But if we're talking about the kind of a war where you are suddenly unwelcome in your area, well, there's why you have your bug out bag. Throw it in your car, get the hell out of your area. Move. If you're a conservative, come here, go to Texas, go somewhere where you have like-minded people who will protect you and fight with you. If you are, a progressive socialist, then leave here, man. Go, get away. I don't want to kill you. I don't want to hurt you. I don't ever want this Boogaloo to happen, but if it happens, you're better off if you're where your people are, so that you don't have to fight. I don't want to fight. You don't want to fight. Dude, I'm way too old to fight, man. I live in a wheelchair. I can't fight. So, anyway, look, guys, I appreciate you coming to my channel. I really do. It's really important to me that you guys hang around. In my next episode, I am going to cover the details, the fun stuff, the tactics, the fight. What would a civil war look like today in the United States? You know, where are the battle lines? What's going to happen? All of that I'm working on. I'm going to have all that for you in a really detailed, kind of long, boring, but I'll try and make it interesting video. So that's coming up. That's coming up soon. I appreciate you listening. Thanks, guys. Take care. I love
You heard a while, but that's just what people do. The theory is you always find somebody new. I guess there was a time I believe that was true, but now